So the Houthis down in Yemen are about to have a rough stretch. Put another way, they're cruising for a bruising at precisely the wrong time. And honestly, I'm okay with that. I mean, look, this is the group who on their flag wrote, "God is the greatest, death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews, victory to Islam." So first off, now you know what it says next time you see that flag flying at a campus protest somewhere here in the United States. But secondly, they didn't bury their ideology deep down in founding documents to where you had to research the organization for years to figure out what it is they're all about. They put it on their flag. They thought, what is the message that we need to send to the entire world when they first come across our organization? And what they settled on was death to America, death to Israel, curse be upon the Jews. So, pretty nuanced organization there, if you will. Now, the reason that I say the Houthis are about to get it in more ways than one is President-elect Trump comes into office in 4-5 weeks now, on or about. And it's kind of like a rite of passage for American presidents to enter office and then sling a bunch of tomahawks into a target somewhere, honestly, in the Middle East, usually, just as kind of a way of saying there's a new sheriff in town. Things are going to be different now, even though usually they end up not being all that different. It's probably going to happen here before too long. Now, I can hear people saying, not Trump. No way. This is the president of peace, right? Doesn't start new wars. First off, take all the stuff from the campaign. You got to set that aside because all politicians just make stuff up to get elected. So now that we're past that, Trump historically has had no issue signing off on airstrikes. I mean, I would argue that the strike that killed Qasem Soleimani in Baghdad, an Iranian general, the head of the Iranian IRGC, was probably the riskiest drone strike in at least the last 10 years. So if Trump is, able and willing to go after an Iranian general in Baghdad, I have no doubt that he won't hesitate to go after Houthi terrorist leaders in Yemen. And the second part here is, even if the Trump administration wants to say, we're not starting any new wars, they could use this as a way to say we're ending the old ones that started under President Biden. I mean, the U.S., U.K., and Israeli strikes are already happening at a pretty regular pace in Yemen, albeit at a rather low intensity. So all Trump would really have to do is ratchet it up to the next level for, a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. Now, there's 4 main reasons that, as we sit here today, it kind of looks like the Houthis are setting themselves up to be enemy number one as soon as Trump comes into office. First off, they have a lot of enemies. Second, they don't really have very many friends. Third, they make for a pretty easy target. And fourth, don't shoot the messenger. I hate to be the one to say this, but it's true. Nobody really cares about Yemen. Just kind of, we got 10 years now, and it's just kind of what the information shows us. But running through these, lots of enemies. So the Houthis, for about a year now, or less than a year, they've been firing missiles and drones at Israel, and that upsets Israel, right? Ally of the United States. They're also firing drones, rockets, and missiles at U.S. military ships in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. That upsets the United States. All right, so you can see how, taking out the Houthis might benefit the U.S. and Israel. The big thing here is they have been launching drones, missiles, and rockets and anything they can at commercial vessels in that region for 14 months now. In fact, the cost of shipping a container from Asia to North Europe is up 270% in 12 months, according to Freightos, a digital marketplace for shipping. And this is actually something that the Biden administration caught a lot of heat on. This terrorist organization that has taken over the western portion of Yemen, and I should note, they're not the official government of Yemen. They just control the western portion. There is an entire government in the east that's not anywhere near as powerful at this point as the Houthis. But the Biden administration caught a lot of heat here, saying wait a minute, how did this terrorist organization just shut down international shipping and drive the cost of shipping goods around the world through the roof? So, a lot of enemies, not just Israel from being on the receiving end of these Houthi missiles and drones, and not just the U.S. ships shooting down rockets, missiles, and drones being fired at them, but think of how many big companies, how many big countries, how many wealthy businessmen around the world would just love for this Houthi thing to finally be resolved and shipping to go back to the way it was, which kind of leads us into the second part here. The Houthis at this point, honestly, not a lot of friends. I mean, in preparation for this video, turns out Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Assad regime weren't available for comment. I don't know. Khamenei, the leader of Iran, just went on some crazy rant the other day about how on X of all places, which is hilarious in a lot of ways, but he was talking about how Iran doesn't have proxies, they don't need proxies, and so the proxies haven't been defeated because they don't have them and don't need them, which is quite the take when, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Assad regime, entirely, like 80% of the axis of resistance was essentially destroyed in the span of the last couple months. You got to think that the last remaining forces in that group, the militias across Iraq and Syria and the Houthis down in Yemen, looked at that and were like, hey, man, like this is the primary backer. What are you doing all of a sudden saying we don't exist? Can't really interpret that as a good sign. Now, there has been some speculation that Russia might get involved with the Houthis, but honestly, that's not really in the cards at all. Maybe more of a discussion before the Assad regime fell and Russian forces were trapped at an airfield and a naval base trying to figure out exactly what they're going to do there. The deal with the Houthis and Russia, first off, the Houthis have actually targeted and struck Russian vessels in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden. But what we've historically seen is when Ukraine launches Western, specifically U.S.-provided munitions into Russia, there's random Russian commentators that are like, you know what we should do to really stick it to the Americans? Maybe give some advanced weaponry to the Houthis. So, like, that's kind of the way that Russia looks at the Houthis, is as a way of sticking it to the Americans. So if Russia isn't going to be able to intervene to prop up Assad, and there's, like, strategic interest there in them maintaining an air hub and a naval base in the Mediterranean, they're not going to do much with the Houthis. They're kind of preoccupied in more ways than one. Right? Now, the third piece here is the Houthis represent a pretty easy target, all things considered. I mean, their air defense is pretty minimal. It does exist, and they've shot down something like 12 Reaper drones over the past couple of years, which is a lot, seriously. But the U.S., U.K., and Israel have been flying multiple sorties, striking targets all across Western Yemen for quite a while now, without any single aircraft being shot down. Well, okay. So this past week, the U.S. did lose an FA-18 that was shot down by the USS Gettysburg. So arguably the most dangerous surface-to-air threat in this arena, in this theater, is the United States. Friendly fire, that's not good. We can kind of joke about it, I think. We're okay to do that because the pilots are safely ejected, brought back on board. Anyways, the Houthis actually didn't claim responsibility for that, but Russia at one point said that the Houthis did. It was a weird whole mix of things. What it looks like happened there is that there was some misidentification. The U.S. had carried out airstrikes into Houthi territory, and as those aircraft were coming back, the Houthis launched drones and missiles at the U.S. Ships, and it looks like there was some sort of misidentification. But anyways, talking about an easy target in Yemen, yes, relatively, at least compared with, Russia, China, Iran, or North Korea. It's a soft target that we reasonably could expect for the U.S. to carry out some sort of operation without losing any aircraft or pilots. And the fourth one here, again, I feel like I'm going to get some nasty comments over this, but I'm just kind of saying this is kind of a fact. It just kind of is what it is. Nobody cares about Yemen. Which, again, if we're looking at this from the overall picture of Trump might just go buck wild and launch attacks like we haven't seen in years against the Houthis, this is kind of an important part of that. There's probably not going to be much pushback here in the United States or really anywhere around the world, right? The Houthis don't have a lot of friends. They have a lot of enemies. And even when you look broadly across Yemen at the humanitarian disaster that war has been, it's been going on for 10 years now. Most people can't point to Yemen on a map. Most people don't have any idea that there was any sort of conflict going on there at all. There's been some 400,000 people killed. 85,000 children have died from starvation. And, I mean, honestly, when was the last time you saw anything about Yemen in the news at all? So from this perspective of, is anybody going to care? Are there going to be any protests, people standing up saying, no, we stand with Yemen? Like, probably not, right? Outside of some random Twitch streamers that are all of a sudden Houthi fans for some reason. Move that group aside, and realistically, nobody's going to care. Take that however you will. So when looking at this in summary, I honestly think that hitting the Houthis hard right away is a way for Trump to show that he's essentially taking a stronger stance than Biden against this terrorist organization. It's something that's going to go over well with a lot of countries around the world, including some of our closest allies, and it'll only really upset Iran, and he can expect little to no domestic backlash at all. So again, kind of seems like the Houthis right now at the end of December 2022 are kind of lining themselves up for a pretty rough patch here in the next couple weeks. But that's all I got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.